The observation chamber hummed with a low, electric tension. Beyond the transparent barrier, a lone human lay strapped to a steel table, his breath shallow, his eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Overhead, the sterile light flickered, casting jagged shadows across his gaunt face. The alien overseer, a tall, sinewy figure with dark, gleaming eyes, observed him with detached curiosity. "Subject appears to be near the breaking point," the overseer noted, his voice a smooth, calculating hiss. He turned to his subordinate, a shorter, jittery alien whose translucent skin pulsed with faint, anxious light. "Prepare the final procedure. We will test his limits once more." The subordinate hesitated. "Are you certain, overseer? This one has already endured more than the others." We risk nothing," the overseer interrupted, his gaze never leaving the human. "They are unpredictable, yes, but ultimately weak. This experiment will conclude our study of human endurance. He will break, and we will learn." Inside the chamber, the human's fingers twitched, a slight movement almost lost in the sterile environment. His mind was a fog of pain and exhaustion, but deep within, a spark of defiance remained. He had been a soldier once, trained to withstand the worst the universe could throw at him. But this was something else. Weeks of relentless torment had whittled him down to the barest essentials of survival. Yet, as the aliens prepared their final test, he felt something stirring, a primal instinct, raw and untamed, clawing its way to the surface. The overseer approached the barrier, placing a thin, elongated hand against the glass. "Initiate the procedure," he ordered. The chamber filled with a low hum as the machinery sprang to life. The human felt a sharp, burning sensation in his veins as the alien technology worked its dark purpose. His body convulsed, muscles straining against the restraints, but his eyes remained fixed on the overseer. Pain had become a constant, a companion that no longer elicited screams. Instead, it fueled the fire smoldering within him. The overseer watched with clinical interest as the human writhed. "Remarkable," he murmured. "They truly are tenacious creatures. But in the end, they all succumb." But the human didn't succumb. Not this time. As the pain crescendoed, something snapped, not a break, but a release. A surge of adrenaline flooded his system, sharpening his senses, amplifying his rage. The human's lips curled into a grin, a feral expression that sent a shiver down the subordinate's spine. "Overseer," the subordinate whispered. "Something is wrong." The overseer frowned, leaning closer to the barrier. "What are you?" With a sudden, violent twist, the human tore free from the restraints. The steel bands snapped like brittle bones under the force of his newfound strength. He stood, unsteady at first, then with growing confidence, eyes locked onto the overseer with a gaze that was no longer purely human. "You think you understand us," the human rasped, his voice low and dangerous. "But you have no idea what we're capable of." The overseer took a step back, his confidence faltering for the first time. "Contain him!" he barked, but it was too late. The human had already crossed the barrier, the thin glass shattering under his assault. Alarms blared as the chamber descended into chaos. And in that moment, as the human advanced with a terrifying calm, the overseer realized their mistake. They had pushed too far, and now they would pay the price. The chapter ends with the human standing amidst the wreckage, eyes blazing with a fury that promises one thing: vengeance. This chapter introduces the central conflict, establishes the protagonist and antagonists, and sets up a tense, gripping narrative with a rising sense of dread. The klaxons blared through the sterile corridors, their shrill cries echoing like the last breaths of a dying beast. The facility, once a fortress of control and cold efficiency, had devolved into chaos. Lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced with each passing moment. Aliens in crisp uniforms scrambled to contain the breach, their movements frantic and disjointed. The air was thick with fear, a fear that only deepened as they heard the echoing footsteps of something relentless, something unstoppable. Inside the command center, the overseer's calm had been shattered. His eyes, once filled with cold calculation, now flickered with panic as he barked orders into a glowing console. "Seal the exits! Activate all security protocols! I want that human contained, now!" His subordinate, quivering under the overseer's withering gaze, stammered as he tried to comply. "Overseer, the systems are not responding. He's overriding everything." The overseer slammed a fist against the console. "Impossible! How could a primitive bypass our security?" But it was happening. The human, now freed from his restraints and driven by a primal fury, had not only broken free, he had seized control. Moving through the facility like a phantom, he disabled security systems, rerouted power, and set traps with a cunning that defied his captor's expectations. He was no longer just a subject. He had become a predator, and this place, once his prison, was now his hunting ground. In the labyrinthine corridors, the human advanced with methodical precision. His every step was calculated, his every action deliberate. The raw power surging through his veins was tempered by years of military training, honed instincts, and an indomitable will. The pain that had once clouded his mind had been replaced by clarity, a singular focus on survival and retribution. Rounding a corner, he encountered the first of the alien guards. The creature, a towering figure clad in armor, hesitated only for a moment before lunging. But hesitation was all the human needed. With a fluid motion, he sidestepped the attack and struck with lethal efficiency, his fist connecting with a satisfying crunch. The guard crumpled to the ground, its lifeless body a testament to the human's newfound strength. The overseer watched the carnage unfold on his monitors, his earlier confidence crumbling with each fallen guard. This cannot be," he muttered, the words trembling with disbelief. He had underestimated the human's resilience, his capacity for adaptation. They all had. But the overseer was no fool. He knew the human's rampage would eventually bring him here, to the heart of the facility. If the human wanted revenge, this was where it would be exacted. And so, with a grim resolve, the overseer began to prepare his final defense, a desperate, last-ditch effort to turn the tide. Meanwhile, the human continued his relentless march. His senses were heightened, his awareness acute. Every flicker of light, every distant sound, registered as potential threats or opportunities. He could feel the overseer's desperation in the air, a palpable tension that hung over the facility like a shroud. The human smiled, a cold, predatory grin. The roles had reversed. Now, it was the overseer who was hunted, and the human who would deliver the final blow. At the entrance to the command center, the human paused. He could hear the faint whir of machinery, the soft murmur of voices. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. His muscles tensed, adrenaline surging through his system as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Inside, the overseer waited, his eyes fixed on the door, his mind racing with calculations and contingencies. The time for observation and experimentation was over. Now, it was a battle of survival, and the stakes could not be higher. The chapter ends with the human poised to strike, his eyes locked on the command center door, knowing that beyond it lay their victory or death. This chapter builds on the tension from the first, pushing the plot forward with a focus on action and strategy. The overseer's desperation and the human's relentless pursuit create a rising sense of urgency, setting the stage for the climactic confrontation to come. The command center door slid open with a hiss, revealing the dimly lit room beyond. The human stepped inside, his gaze immediately locking onto the overseer. The alien stood at the center of the chamber, framed by glowing screens that displayed scenes of carnage from across the facility. Bodies of guards littered the corridors, their lifeless forms a testament to the human's relentless assault. But now, all paths led here, to the final confrontation. The human's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. The overseer was alone, his tall, gaunt figure unnervingly still, hands clasped behind his back. The alien's cold, calculating gaze met the human's, and for a moment either moved. It was a standoff, predator and prey, though it was no longer clear who held which role. "I must admit," the overseer began, his voice a low, resonant hum. "You have exceeded all expectations. We never imagined a mere human could. Spare me the monologue, the human interrupted, his voice cold and clipped. This ends now. The overseer's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. Indeed it does. Without warning, the lights in the room flared blindingly bright, and a force field sprang up between them, crackling with energy. The human recoiled slightly, instinctively shielding his eyes, but he recovered quickly, his mind racing. He had anticipated traps, but this was something else. This was a death trap designed to end him, no matter the cost. You see, human, the overseer continued, pacing leisurely behind the barrier. You may have outmaneuvered my guards, but this is where your rebellion ends. That field is calibrated specifically to your biology. Even you cannot break through it. The human's mind whirred, analyzing the situation. The overseer's arrogance was palpable, but there was a hint of something else, desperation. The alien was stalling, buying time for something, but what? The human scanned the room, searching for a weakness, a flaw in the overseer's plan. Do you really think this changes anything? The human asked, his tone icy. You're trapped in here with me, not the other way around. The overseer chuckled softly, the sound grating on the human's nerves. Ah, the bravado of your kind. It's admirable, if futile. But let me be clear, you will not leave this room alive. As the overseer spoke, the human's eyes caught a flicker of movement on one of the monitors. A countdown, barely visible but unmistakable, ticked away in the corner of the screen. Realization dawned on him. The overseer wasn't just stalling, he was preparing to detonate the entire facility, sacrificing himself to ensure the human's destruction. It was a suicidal gambit, but one born of fear, a fear of what the human might do if he escaped. I see your plan now, the human said, his voice low and dangerous. You're willing to die just to take me down. But tell me, overseer, do your superiors know about this? Or are you acting out of your own fear? The overseer's expression tightened ever so slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. You know nothing of fear, human. We brought you here to study your kind, to understand your strengths and weaknesses. But you are an anomaly, a threat that must be eliminated. The human took a step closer to the force field, his eyes burning with intensity. You fear us because you don't understand us. You see our capacity for destruction, but you fail to grasp our strength, our resilience. That's why you'll fail, because you underestimate what we're truly capable of. The overseer's composure cracked, just for a moment. The human's words had hit their mark. But the countdown continued, merciless and inevitable, its soft ticking a harbinger of doom. With time running out, the human made his move. He lunged toward a nearby console, dodging the arcs of energy that shot from the force field. His fingers flew across the controls, hacking into the system with the skill and precision of a soldier who had seen more than his share of battlefields. The overseer's eyes widened in alarm as the human bypassed the lockdown protocols, overriding the system. No! The overseer shouted, but it was too late. The force field flickered, then died, and the human charged forward. The overseer barely had time to react before the human was upon him, delivering a swift, brutal blow that sent the alien sprawling to the ground. The countdown ticked away, the final seconds slipping through their grasp. Panting, the human slammed his hand onto the main console, initiating the override sequence to cancel the detonation. The room was filled with a tense silence, broken only by the sound of the overseer struggling to rise. The chapter ends with the countdown halting at the last possible moment, the tension hanging in the air as the human stands over the defeated overseer. The question now looms, what comes next? This chapter maintains a steady rise in tension, culminating in a high-stakes confrontation between the human and the overseer. The narrative keeps the focus sharp, driving the plot forward while deepening the characters' motivations and the central conflict. The silence was suffocating. The human stood over the fallen overseer, the dim light casting long shadows across the command center. The countdown had been stopped, but the air was still thick with the tension of what had almost been. The human's chest rose and fell with controlled breaths as he stared down at the alien, who now struggled to sit up, fear and disbelief etched across his gaunt face. "You could have destroyed us all," the human said, his voice low and cold. "But you underestimated what I was willing to do to survive." The overseer grimaced, clutching his side where the human's strike had landed. "You are a mistake," he hissed, eyes blazing with defiance. "A dangerous anomaly that should never have been allowed to exist." The human knelt down, his gaze locking onto the overseer's. "What you call a mistake, we call survival. You think you can contain us, break us, but you have no idea what we're truly capable of." His voice hardened, each word carrying the weight of his resolve. "We're more than you can ever control." For a moment, the overseer's eyes flickered with something like understanding, a realization dawning that perhaps the human was not the anomaly, but the inevitable evolution of a species pushed too far. But pride, stubborn and deep-seated, kept him from acknowledging it. "You've won this battle," the overseer spat. "But your victory is meaningless. The collective will come for you. They will not stop until every last human is. They'll have to get through me first." The human cut him off, rising to his feet. His eyes swept the room, taking in the screens that still displayed the carnage he had wrought. The facility was in shambles, its defenses decimated, and yet the human knew this was only the beginning. The real war was still out there, beyond these walls. The overseer's face twisted in a sneer. "Do you think you can fight them all? The collective spans galaxies, their power unmatched. You cannot win." A cold smile played on the human's lips. "We don't need to win, we just need to make it too costly for them to keep fighting. And if there's one thing we're good at, it's making the impossible possible." The overseer's expression faltered. For the first time, genuine doubt clouded his eyes. The human's words carried an unsettling certainty, a conviction born not from arrogance but from an unshakable belief in his people's resilience. It was a belief that the overseer, for all his knowledge and power, could not comprehend. A sudden alert flashed on the central console, drawing the human's attention. Reinforcements were inbound, more ships from the collective, undoubtedly sent to eradicate the threat the overseer had failed to contain. The human's heart pounded, adrenaline surging as he realized time was running out. He turned back to the overseer, who was still trying to rise. "You have a choice," the human said, his voice calm but firm. "Help me stop them, or die with the rest of your kind. Either way, I'm walking out of here." The overseer's eyes widened in shock. "You would spare me? After everything? Spare you?" The human shook his head. "I'm not doing this out of mercy. I'm doing it because we both know the collective will wipe this place off the map if they find out you failed. You helped me, and maybe you live long enough to see the outcome." A long, tense silence followed. The overseer's mind raced, calculating, weighing his options. He knew the human was right. The collective would not tolerate failure. And yet, the thought of allying with this creature, this human who had torn through his defenses like they were nothing, was almost unthinkable. But in the end, survival won out over pride. With a reluctant nod, the overseer reached out a trembling hand, accepting the human's offer. "What do you propose?" The human smiled, a grim, determined smile. "We send them a message. One they can't ignore." As they worked together to override the communication systems, the human couldn't help but feel the irony. Here they were, bitter enemies forced into an uneasy alliance, both fighting for survival in a universe that sought to destroy them. The message they crafted was simple, but it carried a promise that resonated with both their fates. "We are humanity. You came for us. Now we're coming for you." With that, the signal was sent, broadcasted across the galaxy. The war was far from over, but for the first time, the collective knew true fear, because the one thing they had never accounted for was the unbreakable will of humanity. The chapter ends with the human and overseer standing side by side, watching as the first wave of collective ships appears on the horizon. The battle is imminent, but the human's resolve is unshaken. He had made his choice, and now, the galaxy would tremble.